Hello and welcome to the Spirit Tech Hub. I'm Omer Tzuk, co-founder and community manager of Spirit Tech Hub, a community exploring the intersection of technology, consciousness, and spiritual experience. Today's conversation features Ari Ben-Arie. He's a doctoral candidate in cultural studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and an editor at SAF, a Jerusalem-based creative collective publishing a journal, podcast, and events at the intersection of critical theory and contemporary culture. His research traces the religious imagination surrounding the digital media, asking why cyberspace was experienced from the very beginning as a sacred, liminal, and even mystical realm. So before there were meditation apps, neurofeedback headset, or VR rituals, there was cyberpunk. In the 80s and 90s, a generation of thinkers, writers, and cultural rebels imagined digital technology not as a productivity tool, but as a gateway into altered states, dissolved identities, and something that felt like a sacred. In this conversation, Ari helped us to trace the roots of today's spirit tech and transformative tech movement back to the earlier counterculture imagination. We explore how the psychedelic ideals of the 60s and the 70s, liberation, awe, and the dissolution of ego, were quietly transferred onto cyberspace as digital technology arrived. We ask why early cyberpunk culture found digitally spiritually charged both as chaotic sublime and as a hidden cosmic grammar. And we sit with the hard question, what happened to that dream? Why did the ecstatic exploratory early internet give way to doom scrolling and algorithmic manipulation? We are here to ask together insightful question. What did the cyberdelic imagination get right? What went wrong? And how do we build technologies that support genuine transformation rather than distraction and dependency? Let's dive in. All right. So, hello, Ari.
Hey,
Uh,
Omer.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
yeah, we're going to have to dive into an interesting conversation on cyberpunk, but let me first invite you for introducing yourself. Ari is you're a doctoral candidate at the Department of Cultural Studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and you're also editor of a magazine called SAF, right?
hmm
Where is it from, and what is it? Could you?
Well, SAF is originally a very Jerusalem-oriented project.
Mhm.
Also, it's in a character. It's um, it's a printed magazine. I have some to show. It's real. It's
Wow,
happening.
amazing
We're printing.
paper.
Yeah, and it's all voluntary. Like we're a collective of friends and people who want to take part in this. And the thing is, SAF is about, we can say, a meeting between theory and philosophy, contemporary theory and philosophy, or we can say even radical theory, all of the post-humanisms and so on, and contemporary culture. We just kind of thought that in Jerusalem specifically, there's on the one side very high intellectual culture in the National Library or Van Leer Institute or stuff like that, and then on the other side there's like alternative culture, המפעל, המזקקה, stuff like that. And what we
Yeah,
wanted to do is kind of merge everything together, and the product is SAF. So we're printing. We have a printed magazine once half a year, podcasts, ongoing events in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, soon in Pardes Chana. So that's that.
amazing.
Yeah.
So we'll invite you later to tell us where we can find you. But
Mm-hmm.
so I would like to dive into our conversation because I have
Sure.
invited you as because I've heard your conversation about what I see as like the philosophical roots, historical roots for what we brought us here today, which
Mm-hmm.
this is like we are here on the Spiritech Hub online
Mm-hmm.
meeting. And most of the terms that we are speaking about in this community are spirit tech, transformative tech, something that a term that was also very popular in the States like 4 years ago, I guess, was called consciousness hacking.
Mm-hmm.
And but we also have interface with more you will say mild languages like technologies for well-being and human flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we speak about those technologies, we usually speak about how they can help our mental health, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, but also we are seeking for like deeper connection and to feel awe and very transformative, deep experiences.
Enchanted, baby. I like
Yes,
that word.
yeah. So and but I think that always we have a short span of memory in a sense of
Right.
historical memory, and I think that
Right.
it's very important for us in this community to get to know the philosophical and historical roots of these thoughts that technology can be this kind of a tool.
Yeah.
And I'm very fond of indeed the cyberdelic culture, but then I found out about the cyberpunk as also another inspiration. So maybe could you tell us?
Yeah, so let's do this. I'll join your introduction and say something important because I a bit I snooped around in your YouTube and now you said that a lot of people are very like tech oriented or come from neuroscience or computer science. So I want to make clear I think something important what I'm bringing to the table to this meeting. Let's say, yeah. And while we can talk, I see that you talked a lot about contemporary technologies or even forward thinking. What I will bring is a bit of backward thinking. So I can say I deal with the history of ideas, okay? And the ideas that I'm kind of tracing is this enchantment of digitality and how it developed in different cultural, or we can say from the start, counter-cultural milieus. And this is what I'll bring to the table today. Yeah, an inspection of of this kind of tracing of a history of ideas, how it came to be as it is today. And you're very right to say that this term cyberdelics has roots and history in this history of ideas, the counterculture from 60s, 70s to the 80s onwards. Cyberdelics is a result of a transformation of ideas in that countercultural milieu. Um, yeah, so you'd like me to kind of dive in and talk about how this term was originated and all of that?
Yes, indeed. Like, what is we see that a very important root here is the term cyber. Certainly, like cyber, like you know what where did the word cyberspace came in
Yeah,
general? It's
yeah.
a very interesting metaphor to speak about the cyberspace, right?
So you can see my slides, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's kind of start locating ourselves. I think we can talk about different stuff. I focus in my research on the kind of countercultural movement, which I term cyberpunk, which was mainly active in the 80s and 90s. But maybe, Omer, later we can also ask about even go further and ask about the roots in the 60s, 70s, and maybe how the field of cybernetics affected stuff. But for now, we'll focus, if it's okay, on this movement that I call cyberpunk, which really originated this term cyberspace. Okay.
Let's do it. Maybe you can share, so like to present it as bigger on the screen.
1 second. I'll tell you what. Share. No.
Not share. Sorry, it's like you need to do slideshow.
Slideshow. Okay, the thing is, I'm gonna jump between stuff. I brought a very eclectic presentation, so we'll jump in and out. And okay, so one second, Omer, I'm sorry, I'll still show it like this because I have some notes that I've written aside
Okay.
here and I need them beside me, so it's okay?
Yes,
Okay, so maybe I'll start and say something just very background and basic about what cyberpunk is. Like, what is this cultural phenomena we're talking about? And I think that most people kind of know cyberpunk as a form of fiction, a literary fiction and film. And I brought here, like, these are the main candidates that people know. But before we continue, I'd like to add that, and this is also what I thought when I started my research, but slowly, I came to understand that during the 80s and 90s, this term cyberpunk kind of expanded to include a much broader, we could say, social movement or countercultural movement with its own magazines, conferences, leaders, and I brought here some of the people that were associated with this movement. Tim Leary, of course, we all know, which we'll go back to his famous saying, PC is the LSD of the 90s. But here are some more kind of figures that were associated with this cyberpunk movement. So cyberpunk was a kind of, let's say, ethos, and we'll get to that kind of another transformation or metamorphosis of the countercultural movement. And other than that, cyberpunk was also a place to think about theory, about theory of digitality. There's a lot of media work which engage with cyberpunk works. Maybe you know some of these works. So in the 80s, 90s, it was kind of a very broad cultural movement. This is what I tried just to base before we talk. When we talk about cyberpunk, we don't talk just about the prose of Gibson or Blade Runner, but this broader countercultural movement. And you said, like, about this word cyberspace, and when did it come? Where did it come from? So in many ways, I think that we kind of underestimate how important was the historical juncture of the 80s and 90s for understanding the contemporary moment. Like, if you think about it, a lot of tectonic shifts in culture and technology and politics kind of happened, which kind of defined the present moment, right? It was the time of Reagan and Thatcher and globalization and capitalism and pop culture. And most importantly for us, the digital revolution. Of course, computing started before, but in the 80s and 90s, personal computing was becoming very prevalent, and the establishment of network communications. And in many ways, the cyberpunk movement, I introduce it as sort of a cultural buffer to understand these immense shifts that were happening in the world. One second. And of course, at the center of its themes and aesthetics is the engagement with digitality. Kind of, for us, we are already living in this digital world. Yeah, it's like a fish in water. But for them, it was something very new. And in this sense, cyberpunk was kind of the first cultural movement to come and kind of trace what's happening there. And we know cyberpunk as this dystopian movement also that tries to think how digitality kind of affects us in I don't know, quite bad ways, but one second, Omer, I'm taking my notes.
For example,
Yeah.
in Blade Runner, how it's one of my favorite movies, and it's indeed like a mixture of very film noir, like very dark and pessimistic view of the future. And there are
Right.
glimpses of this kind of how the machines are actually have this sort of humanity, human-like behavior. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so how do you connect? Like, what is the manifestation of cyberpunk in the
Uh,
story? If you
can
can
you
make it
explain
more,
again? I'm sorry.
can, can
Can you
make,
ask again?
yeah, like if you can make a bit clearer, what was is it like in Blade Runner? Is it the style or
Ah,
is it
what makes
something?
cyberpunk cyberpunk
Yes,
in a way? So
yes.
this all kind of I wanted to lead us towards this kind of enchantment of digitality. But this enchantment was a very small part of the broader cyberpunk, let's say, response to digitality. And I've brought some examples here. Yeah. I'll do this, Omer. I do want to tell something else, which is important, and then we'll go straight into enchantment. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
Um, I want us to read something. Okay, so cyberpunk has this very multifaceted response to digitality. A lot of it is kind of, deals with cyborgs and virtual reality, and also how corporations use technology in not very good ways. But across cyberpunk's kind of response to digitality, there's a sense of this something new and grand is happening, a sort of an evolutionary leap in reality in its response to digitality. And this is kind of the sense that I want to explore a bit, and then we'll go from there to enchantment, okay?
mm-hmm,
So we're reading from Douglas Rushkoff's Siberia, and he writes, time seems to be speeding up. New ideas and technologies have accelerated our culture into an almost unrecognizable reality. And those on the frontier tell us that this is only the beginning. Inspired by the computer, chaos math, chemicals, and creativity, this renaissance has been interpreted by many as an evolutionary leap for humanity into another dimension. And I'll read another thing from Mondo magazine, which very much parallels this. Technical culture has gotten out of hand. The advance of the sciences are so deeply radical, so disturbing, upsetting, and revolutionary that they can no longer be contained. Now, before we start talking about why digitality was enchantment in cyberpunk, we really need to understand about how, like, also as I already said, for us, we are already used to digitality, but for cyberpunk, it was something new. And as we can see, it was not only like an increase of quantity, more of the same, just more media, more transmission, and more information, but really a break. Something new was happening. And this is why I want to stress kind of the urgency of this of cyberpunk's response, and how important was this juncture. And we need to understand that digitality really takes information transmission to this whole different level, which was unprecedented. And in the Mondo culture and in cyberpunk culture, they were just amazed with the sheer capacities of the how things are speeding up. Like, and it almost seemed like, as we see here, it's uncontainable. It's something completely new. Okay.
yeah.
And again, with digitality, we have representation. In analog representation is just, we take a waveform, we inscribe it into vinyl, it has this very palpable, tangible materiality. But in digitality, everything, as we know, is translated into code and easily reproducible, and you can copy it endlessly and manipulate it, and with network transmission you can send it momentarily. So the sense was, and this maybe like this already we're bringing this countercultural aura to digitality, the freeing up of information. And this is what I a bit wanted to see, an evolutionary leap. Something completely new is happening in reality. And even in the Mondo magazine, which I brought a quote from, they call it, we're surfing the edge, like in a way, kind of history completes itself, or
Interesting.
yeah. And
Like the place that I'm come from, for my research in my PhD was in a term like it's called complex systems. It's
yeah,
when system interacts, you can see like when you kind of, and one of the slogans that started the era of this kind of research, the complex system research, the slogan is more is different.
hmm,
So in a sense, I think that those thinkers of this era, just before it was before the internet, before it was very common to have a computer, certainly before the smartphones. These are the people that kind of recognize that we are on the verge of this acceleration of
exactly,
proliferation of technologies
exactly.
that are emitted from this kind of uh,
Exactly, exactly. And now we're starting to talk already about, like, enchantment. But before enchantment, we can say kind of liberation. I was planning on talking about it maybe later, but the basic kind of connection between the culture of the 60s and 70s and cyberculture is the networked configuration. I mean, what is counterculture about? I'm generalizing a bit, but counterculture is about, resisting hierarchical power, linear organization, and the consolidation of power by elites. And it's about community, creativity, and kind of digitality, if we think about it, affords all of that. It affords network communication, decentralized communication, because it's accessible, because communication was very not hierarchical, but distributed. Yeah, you sit here and you get what's on TV. And now you have a hub, which is also a hub of creation. The personal computer is not just receiving, it's creation. So, it kind of connects to ideals of radical autonomy, of creativity, of exploration. So all of these kind of countercultural ideals kind of are intermingled with the onset of digitality. And of course, what I kind of try to show, and I'm going towards, is that if LSD was a kind of liberating force, and as in a way, this is how the countercultural movement saw it. Yeah, you kind of free of your mind. The psychedelic realms is also a kind of a shattering and shaking of moral and social codes into new domains and realms. So in their imagination, the onset of digitality affords all of this. Also gives us these kind of new freedoms that were celebrated in the countercultural movement. And yeah, Tim Leary himself kind of declared that he's a cyberpunk and said PC is the LSD of the 90s. And a lot of countercultural milieus kind of switched their rhetoric in the early 80s. I don't know, John Lilly, who else? Terence McKenna, of course, and kind of embraced this informatical cyber jargon, let's say. There's something to say about cybernetics and its relations with countercultural spirituality. But if it's okay, Omer, we'll dive deeper a bit, but more to see more clearly how the digital realm was not only liberating, but spiritually charged. Okay,
Okay.
and
Okay.
my research kind of asks, this is the question that I ask is why. What is it about the digital medium that this countercultural milieu found so spiritually charged? And I've come up with the answer, Omer.
Mm.
But first, maybe a small example, okay? Mm, 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 mm.
So
Just to feel what we're talking about. Yeah, Omer, I'm listening.
so I'm curious about this kind of transition, whether it was maybe we'll mention it later, whether it was a transition or because as I see, like cyberpunk is not necessarily indeed influenced by the doors of perception in a sense, like the opening
Mm-hmm.
up of um, transformative experience through psychedelics in the style of psychedelics. And at the same time, more or less, there was also, along with the digital revolution, there was also occurring this and indeed we see like that few of the people were in both
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
involved in both kind of movements. Timothy Leary
Mm-hmm.
certainly, but psychedelics themselves were also the first kind of wave of thinkers was also kind of separated in a way from the digital world. It was also connected with trying to um, be inspired by ancient cultures and to
Right.
see how we can use ritual
Right.
for transformative experiences and how those two interacted in this period.
Yeah, so I have a lot of what to say about what you said. And the first is this. Well, what brought me to my research is that I love cyberpunk. I love the literature, I love the films, and I found that I am moved by them spiritually, really. And
Mm,
that I grew, and something in Akira or Blade Runner or Neuromancer kind of caught me. Not only like, okay, there's a lot of digital jargon, but there's a spiritual sentiment underlying. And I said, I did my BA in MA in religious studies, and I said, okay, let's go. Go into a contemporary culture and think about the religious dimensions of cyberpunk. And I think even if you think about the aesthetics of Blade Runner, there's a kind of aesthetics of what researcher David Nye calls the technological sublime, okay, where complexity and religious awe kind of merge together. And you think about the aesthetics of Blade Runner, this never-ending technological, infrastructural machinery, which kind of looks like fractals onto the horizon. And in that sense, I think this was the kind of the meeting point of cyberpunk and the counterculture. That the counterculture, as I see it, and I think it's a very important tradition, has at its center this kind of a true fascination with awe,
mm,
with the mysterious, with and I think this is where cyberpunk and the counterculture met, and this is the transposition. The cultural transposition is taking this awe from traditional cultures and shamanic, I don't know, traditions to this new realm of digitality. Let's, if it's okay, let's read the opening editorial of Mondo, the great cyberpunk magazine, okay?
okay.
And it will answer your question better than me. All the old war horses are dead. Eco-fundamentalism is out, conspiracy theories demode, drugs are obsolete, yet the pagan innocence and idealism that was the 60s remains and continues to exert its fascination on today's kids. Look at the old footage of Woodstock and you wonder, where have all those wide-eyed, ecstatic, orgasm-slurping kids gone? They're all across the land, dormant like deeply buried perennials. So I think this is beautiful because there's the guy who called it, he calls himself Are You Serious? And his real name is Ken Goffman, the editor of Mondo. And what I think he sees is that an ecstatic movement. And I call this a pursuit of wonder, a pursuit of awe that kind of lit up the 60s and 70s. And he asked, where are they? And this is written in the 80s. And he writes, the cybernet is the place. If fusion is real, we find out about it fast. The old information elites are crumbling. The kids are at the control. The magazine is about what we do until the millennium comes. We're talking about total possibilities, radical assaults on the limits of biology, gravity, and time, the end of artificial scarcity, blah, blah, blah. You get the gist. And he writes at the end, making bliss states our normal waking consciousness, becoming the bionic angel. So you already see the spiritual fulfillment, this ecstasy will be fulfilled from now on with digital technologies. And maybe Omer, we can go a bit further about why. And I'll kind of share my answer of why they found digitality so enchanting. It's okay?
Indeed, yeah.
But any questions until now, or we will do questions at the end?
For me, it sparks many questions, and especially like the question of, as you describe it, there is something almost in those thinkers. It's like they speak like priesthood. They it's a form of this kind of talking in a way which is very speaking about like prophecies and the fulfillment of prophecies, and actually, and we see here a prophecy which is the dawn of new humanism, and we are certainly we don't see it fulfilled nowadays.
Yeah. Let's go back to that after we give them the full stage and ask at the end what happened.
Yes.
Is that okay, Omer?
Sure.
Because it's kind of the question is spot on. You know Frederick Jameson. Have you heard of him?
No, I don't think so.
No, he's a cultural theorist, and he talks about the onset of postmodernity. And postmodernity, for him, means we don't have any more stories of emancipation. Like the Christianity gave us a story of emancipation, communism gave us, maybe liberal democracy gave us, and now where are we? It's just a mess, a chaos of little bits of something. But interestingly, he says that cyberpunk is the cultural movement that closed the light switch. It was the last truly emancipatory cultural movement before the ongoing, never-ending now. But okay, we'll get to that at the end.
Interesting.
So basically, and I won't take very kilo. I don't want to make it a long presentation, but I think it's worth stressing what I see is the mechanics of disenchantment, and this is also the main part, the juice of my research. So interestingly, what I noticed is that you can explain why this countercultural milieu was enchanted with digitality with two opposing answers. And in my dissertation, I just named them chaos and order. On the one side, digitality was perceived as totally chaotic and as such as sublime, liminal. And on the other side, is totally orderly, but we'll get to that. Let's start with the chaos part. So I want to share with you a bit from Gibson's Neuromancer, the most iconic ever cyberpunk novel. And just let's see how he sees digitality. What is digitality for him? So he writes, this is a very known definition he gives in the book. So cyberspace is a graphic representation of data abstracted from the banks of every computer in the human system. Unthinkable complexity. Lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters and constellations of data. So we get a sense of this something quite sublime, complex, and I'll read also this. This is an experience in cyberspace from his book. He closed his eyes. It came on gradually, a flickering, nonlinear flood of fact and sensory data, surreal jump cuts and juxtapositions, like riding a roller coaster that phased in and out of existence, with lightning alterations in paradigm and symbol systems. And this is the important part. The data had never been intended for human input. So we see this sense of, with digitality, we have the collapse of the dam, of information, and the onset of the flood, and the data is even it's like Mati Mariansky, who I think you know, wrote about it. Consuming information digitality today is like trying to drink water from a fire hydrant. Okay, it's not sustainable, and this is the connection. Digitality that translates everything to codes and transmits it instantaneously, and you don't have to carry this film. And this implosion of information is beyond our grasp. Okay, and here a connection is kind of crafted between just the sublime, the liminal, the religious unknown, and the digital realm. Like a lot of times, as we know, that religion deals with spirituality, deals with a lot of issues, and I'm a bit generalizing, but we can say that religion is the place to think about what transcends meaning or transcends symbolism. Symbolism can't grasp it. And a lot of time, also psychedelic states are kind of, you finish your trip and like it's undescribable. The words are not made for this.
Ineffable.
And ineffable, exactly. So the basic connection that is traced a lot of times is that the entrance is digitality is kind of disorienting and disintegrating, and because of that opens up onto a kind of sublime realm. And in my dissertation, I work a lot with this term mysticism, because mysticism, again, I generalize a bit, but mysticism basically, in the model of William James, is this inner transformation from this kind of dark night of the soul, when the self is imploded by too much meaning and collapses, but after collapse, a new order is given. Okay, and a lot of time also the psychedelic trip unfolds like this, from kind of over something, like you keep thinking and it's spiraling, and then you shut down, and like a new clarity arises. And a lot of the discourse around cyberspace in Neuromancer, in Cyberpunk Thong, kind of retraces this mystical logic. Okay, mysticism, digitality is a place that can inhibit this sort of transformation. I want to go into more exampmes. I think time is short, and I'll go to the order part because it's, I think, even more interesting for us. Yeah.
What I find, I'm thinking about what's your, because certainly we kind of in terms of history timescales, we kind of went into a new culture extremely fast in terms of since the dawn of digitality and internet and cyberspace, And there is some kind of, because as you presented it, there is some kind of founding mythologies that were in the
Mm-hmm.
basis of trying to envision how this future might look like.
Right.
And
Right.
indeed, mythologies are very important in cultures because they do help us to navigate
Right.
in this kind of and try to, and they strive at least to establish what we should do and how we should act and what is the hero story in this kind of world, new world. And indeed, you mentioned the Matrix, which is also a
Right.
masterpiece of mythology, which speaks about it.
Right. Right.
And nevertheless, like I think that as much as it's a great, great film, great story, there is something which in this kind of transformation, in this kind of culture, which is very resistant for stories because of its um, abundance of information. It's kind of the abundance of when you are kind of really we'll say jacked
Mm-hmm.
into the internet, into most many of its current
Mm-hmm.
manifestations in social networks and things like this. You are just gulping a lot of information, and it's become more out of your hands in a sense. You're
Mm-hmm.
not the hero anymore. So
Yeah.
maybe I would like to ask you if you can say like yeah, indeed, what do you think about what could be helpful for us in this era in navigating and really you talked about cybernetics, and cybernetics is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
capability.
Okay. So I'll ask you this, Omer, like kind of a meta question. How much more time do we have? Because this is, no, it's okay. Because I really wanted to touch about kind of the order side, and I think it's also a bit more relevant. And then really gladly talk about what's happening today. But if we don't have a lot of time, so
We can take more like I guess 20 minutes because yeah.
okay, so let me just quickly go over the other side. I presented the chaos side, and I'll present the order side. I think it also will be kind of more relevant for today, and then we'll talk about imagination and how it's unfolded really in contemporary culture. It's okay, Omer?
Yes.
Because I think this part can be relevant and interesting for why digitality is enchanted. And I'll do it quite quickly, really. So if we talked about digitality as being enchanted because it's a chaotic realm, the other side of it is it being a kind of very orderly realm. I mean, the digital representation is based on very formal, systematic grammars. Yeah, the thing, it's not just, again, this waveform which is encoded in vinyl, it's translated into code and vectorized. Each part of the vector gets its code and all of that. And basically, what's the cyberpunk imagination sees is this, that not only is this kind of there's a new way of representation, not only taking and inscribing, but translating to code and reassembling.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of representation, quite interestingly, you would think that it will mess things up, it will mess reality up, because it's not just a copy of the waveform, but interestingly, this restructuring and reassembly works a lot better. The digital image and digital sound is much more vivid, much more alive, and has a lot more less noise than film and all of that. And they kind of start thinking, hey, if digital representation works so good, maybe reality itself is digital, basically. And we need to understand that this was also a time that people, kind of were very aware about the genetic code and DNA. So this richness, vitality of biology. Okay, so it manifests in very different various ways, but basically there's a underlying code which manifests it. And I think this is the kind of enchantment of digitality that is a bit more interesting. It's not just a chaotic realm, but a secret grammar, a logos, a gnosis. And I want to show you another small example from the book Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. So he writes, early linguists, as well as the Kabbalists, believed in a fictional language called the Tongue of Eden, the language of Adam. It was the language of the Logos, the moment when God created the world by speaking a word. All language, whether heavenly or human, derives from one source, the divine name. The machine language of the world, Hero says. Computer speaks machine language. It's written in ones and zeros, binary code. It's the root of existence. It's the tongue of Eden. You get what I'm heading towards.
Yes.
But the kind of thought is that through digitality and binary code, maybe reality itself can be formalized. If we represent the digital representation works so good, and even Tim Leary shared this idea. Why digitality was I won't read this, but for him, why digitality was so important, because we're at the edge of knowledge. We kind of we now have this master key, let's say, to think about the code underlying reality. Can I read this for a second? I think it's nice for us because it's Tim Leary after all. It seems that the universe from galaxy to atom is made up of bits of very highly meteorized units of data. This 15 billion year old information array is literally an electronic telecommunication show. The universe is a bunch of digital programs running. Evolution is programmed by algorithms which use the adjacent geometry of cellular automata recursion. The elements of this universe are digital, electronic, linguistic. Anyway, you get it. And I think this sort of enchantment is much more interesting. Thinking that ontology itself can be, I don't know, redescribed in its essence by referring to code and binary. And if you think about it, this idea is very spiritually charged, and it's still with us today. I mean, if really reality is based on code, and this is the code. Yeah, God as a watchmaker or God as a computer scientist. So this really gives us a master key, not only of knowledge, but of manipulating reality, and Matrix is based on this. The Gnostic dream, the reality can be fully a simulation if reality can be translated into digitality. And this is this kind of dream of singularity. One day we'll map it all out. Yeah, and we'll get and of course all the dream of AIs being sentient and omniscient, all of them are based on this idea that digitality is an underlying grammar of the cosmos itself. And this is why I wanted to say this, because I think it's more important and interesting for us as an idea. We can ask if it's true or not, but I think I'm done with that, and let's talk about the contemporary moment, and also a word about cybernetics if you want at any stage. Yeah.
Certainly. No, I can see here like the nexus in Timothy in the last piece that you read of Leary of indeed like historical thinking together with this was also time for like the rise of information theory, and which we see like also like in parallel to, but I think it's also kind of very natural that we in every stage in human history we project our current technologies onto our understanding of the cosmos, or the so in a sense, it's not necessarily mean that like that
Yeah,
you know
yeah, yeah,
we believe this is reality, but it's kind of it's telling about our consciousness as this is the era in which we interpret everything through the lens of information and
yeah. Even though that, the thread is much longer of this idea. I mean, thinking that ontology itself, reality, is created by a language or a grammar or a logos, or God created by the word, or I mean, thinking that our formal systematization of reality uh, is reality itself.
yeah,
It's a very even Platonic idea. Yeah,
right,
there's a meta grammar generating all that is. So we could say that each culture kind of thinks through its technologies, but kind of digitality, not only because this is my research, but kind of brings it to the apex. Yeah, if there's a grammar, this is the grammar of reality, in a way. And again, I think it's a very interesting question to ask. Well,
so
is
so
is this
maybe
true? Is reality digital?
right.
And it also takes us to come to terms with the dreams of cyberpunk. But Omer, wherever you want to go from here.
Yes, I think that maybe we'll this because we can dive into each one of those directions indifferently. But maybe I would like to wrap up to bring to a closure back into the future, like back into our
Yeah,
current
sure.
state, and because we don't. I think that it's maybe it's also telling that we are here. We are in the where 26, almost 40 years after Timothy Leary was writing these
Mm-hmm.
words, and we are living in such a different
Yeah,
cyber scenario than I could ever imagine. I think like the birth,
right.
like it's always in a sense funny and cute to see one of them, indeed, like one of my favorite movies, Blade Runner, and how he viewed technology, like what was like the kind of how they saw that we were going to communicate in the future. They didn't think about smartphones in a sense. There were no smartphones,
Sure.
and smartphone entered to our lives, in many other things. And I wonder, where are the visionary of our era, and how can we? What do you think about how can we reestablish this kind of positivity in a sense? Because we have mostly
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah. That's true. I always, when I talk about cyberpunk, I have to sum up with a sense of small disillusionment. Yeah, from the cyberpunk visions, and we can ask why and how, and I don't know. I don't know how much they want me to go into it. But basically, from this kind of ecstatic, liminal, sublime digital realm, we have a very orderly, known, quite boring and dull interface, which is geared towards not mind exploration, but I don't know, doom scrolling more than mind exploration. And yeah, and also there's like a bigger question about also what we talked now. The dream of cyberpunk was that, if you think about Neuromancer and most famously Matrix, that there's a straight continuity between our consciousness and the spirit, the digital realm, right? You kind of you jack in through a cable, and then there isn't even a difference. There's no interface, a dream of no interface, of jacking in completely. And I think that a lot of the spiritual dreams around digitality were based on this. But this is exactly what is not manifesting. Okay, when we try to make the interface more immersive, what we get is not real immersion and wonder. We get a headache. Okay, from Google Glass and stuff like that. And I think the reason is much broader. We won't really go into it, but maybe digitality itself, after all, reality itself, after all, isn't digital. Okay, digital is just a form of representation, and the real sublime is not what is found through formalization or digitality, but the real sublime is just out there. And there's a real difference between the sublime of psychedelics, which is in your consciousness, and the sublime of nature, and the sublime of digitality, which is artificial. And I do believe there's a difference. Okay, so there's like an end capacity to the spiritual I don't know, power of digitality. That being said, of course, that technologies can be enchanting. I was enchanted by digital. Even the early internet was about exploration. I don't know how old you are, but I don't know if you remember, like scrolling with the modem, and it was decentralized, and it was and because it wasn't.
Modem.
Yeah, and because it wasn't all through the channels of Google and Facebook and these 5 platforms, this is the paradox. How much information we have, but only like 4 platforms we use. Never mind. And the early internet was an enchanting place, and there was the sense of exploration and creativity and weird blogs and weird internet and all of that. And of course, I found my enchantment through technology and through media and through cyberpunk movies. So technology, of course, can be an enchanting tool. And I think that sadly, what we need to worry about is not technology, but the society we live in and how we use technology. I mean, with the algorithmization of ourselves, our behavior, our everything, our knowledge. So Google can, or Facebook can tomorrow rewire all their algorithms for the purpose of enchanting. Okay, if they kind of rewire, how do we, spread wonder and fulfillment of creativity, but this is not what of course, but this is not what they do. They just need more money because we're in a capitalist society, and all that happens is engagement and all of that. So I think the real questions before us about enchanting technologies have to do with the capacities of our societies to build new dreams, and the technological recruitment will come. I'm sure of it. And what you're doing is I think one of the, you're turning the wheels. You're a hub for thinking about using technologies in this kind of other ways, not only commercial. So this was my kind of, I don't know if it gives you an answer, Omer, but this was it.
Well, it gives us more questions to explore in the next times, but I guess we are heading towards our capacities as human beings to sit in front of a computer and a screen, and wow, this was a great first exploration of the cyberpunk and the cyberdelic society, like thoughts and thinkers. And thank you very much, Ari.
Thank you, Omer. It was nice.
Yeah, I hope we'll be continue